All right, we're finally up to key topic 24, Navtech or Navtex. Navtex, which you can kind of see it's an amalgam of navigational telex. It's an international automated medium frequency, which I did kind of highlight, direct printing service for delivery of navigational and meteorological warnings and forecasts, as well as urgent maritime safety information, MSI, to ships. Navtex was developed to provide a low-cost, simple, and automated means of receiving this information aboard ships at sea. The area covered can extend as far as 400 nautical miles from the broadcast station. And I think Wikipedia says 200 miles, so I found another source that does say as far as 400 miles, which is pretty darn far when you consider the sea areas. This is a Navtex receiver on the screen, an NX700A. There are no user fees associated with receiving Navtex broadcasts, as the transmissions are typically transmitted from agencies such as the Navy or Coast Guard in the U.S. or the National Navigation Authority in Canada. And I think I just put this in because I do like maps. And the gold area is the land masses on the Earth. And you can see North America over here on the right side of the screen. And the Pacific, our Pacific basin is covered by the United States, and certainly so is the Atlantic, the area that we're in right now. And the two northern parts are covered by Canada. So basically all of North America is going to be covered by the United States or Canada. But it is kind of interesting to see that Russia covers three areas. Now, when we get to the other side of the pond, the Atlantic Ocean, we see the England or the United Kingdom covering the northern part, France covering the central part, and South Africa covers a substantial portion of the oceans. India, Pakistan, Spain, Japan. It's interesting that Japan covers such a wide area, and China doesn't cover any of it. So I think China just apparently doesn't want to have anything to do with Navtex. And as you see at the bottom, September 2019, the U.S. Coast Guard proposed shutting down the medium frequency Navtex services and relying on satellite communications. So you can kind of tell just when we looked at the machine, it looks like yesterday's technology, and that's probably not going to survive by the time you guys get to your senior years. That's probably going to be a distant memory. But it is still in effect, and there is still a requirement. All right, so when does Navtex broadcast typically achieve maximum transmitting range? We didn't really cover this, but I think we do know that it's radio waves that can go out, substantially far into the sea. So just generally, when does radio waves, when do they go the farthest? Is it local noontime, middle of the night, C, sunset, or D, post-sunrise? And I think we touched on it, and you may already know from your own personal experiences with tuning a radio at different times of day. We also know that it is medium frequency, so we have some understanding of how those waves operate. They basically bounce off the ionosphere, and they travel great distances that way. And we saw that there is more interference during the day, solar radiation or whatever, So basically, we're not going to pick local at noontime. That's actually when the transmitting range is probably the least. Middle of the night, that's probably the best, which is what the question is asking. Sunrise and sunset, well, it's in between the two options. So the best would be the middle of the night B. And it's basically it's best in the middle of the night via skywave propagation. Of course, when they're closer than 100 miles to a major seaport, the Navtex broadcast should come in loud and clear anytime, day or night. All right, I guess I might not have launched that poll correctly. I'm going to share the results, which there was no results. Okay, next. What is the transmitting range of most Navtex stations? Relaunch. Is it A, typically 50 to 100 nautical miles from shore? B, typically upwards of 1,000 nautical miles during the daytime? C, typically 200 to 400 nautical miles? Or D, it is limited to line of sight or about 30 nautical miles? Which sounds like VHF. All right, which VHF? Basically, Navtex goes out to nearly 400 miles. So Wikipedia says 200. Some of the other marine sources I found say 400. So the correct answer would be that the transmitting range of most of the stations in Navtex are 200 to 400 nautical miles. The greatest range reducer is onboard noise. If your receiver does not offer good range, listen with a communication receiver and try to track down the onboard noise. All right. The unit itself is a small, low-cost, and self-contained smart printing radio receiver. It is able to check each incoming message to see if it has been received during an earlier transmission, and the receiver can be programmed to reject unwanted broadcasts. The frequency of transmission of these messages is 518 kilohertz in English, while 490 kilohertz is sometimes used to broadcast in a local language. So I would imagine, Japanese would probably use 490 and broadcast that the Pacific Basin on their side as on 490. But I think there's also going to be a English transmission on 518. The messages are coded with a header code identified by using single letters of the alphabet to represent broadcasting stations and type of messages. For example, FA56 is where F is the ID of the transmitting station, A includes the message category navigational warning, and 56 is the message identifier. And when I was looking at all the various samples of the messages, they all seem to start with ZCZC. You can see the two that I put up here do start with that. And then they go into the numbering that we're talking about. So P is the ID of the transmitting station. A is the category, and in this case, A we saw as navigational, which is the main thing that navigational telex is set up to do, is navigation. And on the other side it's EE, but it looks like that's a gale warning, so that's more weather, so that E must stand for weather. Which of the following is the primary frequency that is used exclusively for Navtex broadcasts internationally? Now this I figured out before I put the prior screen up, just by knowing that Navtex is medium frequency. So let's see if you can get it just because you know what medium frequency is. Our distress channel in medium frequency is in this 2180, I think it's 2182 or 3. I don't. But the digital medium frequency, their equivalent of the DSC, is 2187.5. But that's going to be reserved exclusively for distress type traffic. So even though it is in the correct kilohertz, it is in the medium frequency, which is Navtex. It is not the one that should be used. Now I do see 2 other kilohertz, so maybe those are in medium frequency. D says channel 16, which that's VHF. That's only going to go out to 50, 60 miles, so no, that's not going to be it. And what they switch over, they don't really... certainly the transmitting station isn't going to switch what channel they transmit on. I suppose they're hinting that maybe they'll do both. They don't. They just do the medium frequency. And it is not the 2187.5 because that's exclusively DSC services. So it's going to be one of these other 2 kilohertz. We do know that the medium frequencies, all the frequencies, pretty much are multiplied by 10. So this 2000 is in between 200 and, I'm sorry, it's in between, and they all start with a 3 also. So it is in between 300 and 3000 kilohertz. So the 4209 technically is over 3000 kilohertz, so that must be in the high frequency. So it's not going to be Navtec. So just by process of elimination, we're going to come down to 518 because it is the only other medium frequency and on the list here, and certainly we're not going to use a DSC. So I just guessed 518 without even knowing, and it turns out that was the right answer. So basically know that Navtex is medium frequency, and you should be able to, just by kind of knowing your frequency bands, be able to zero in on which one it is. And the poll, share the results. No results again on this one. Yeah, this one is a little tougher. Maybe that's why they waited it for, to put it as number 24. All right. Trudging forward. What means are used to prevent the reception of unwanted broadcasts by vessels utilizing the Navtex system? Going to relaunch that poll. So how do you prevent unwanted messages? How do you do that on your telephone, I guess, also? A, operating the receiver only during daytime hours. Well, that's probably when you're going to get the most unwanted messages. But at least they will be closer, so maybe they're hinting that you don't want messages from the other side of the planet. B, coordinating reception with published broadcast schedules. That sounds like a lot of busy work for Navtex, which probably isn't as important as it once was. You have to go through the published schedules and then coordinate your reception. What, put your Navtex on a timer? Probably not. C, programming the receiver to reject unwanted broadcasts. And we did see that it can be used to basically weed out messages that are of no interest to the ship. So, yeah, if it can do that, that would be the best way to get rid of those unwanted broadcasts. Too bad we can't get our cell phones to do the same, or our email. It's kind of like a spam folder. Or D, automatic receiver desensitization during night hours. Sensitization, quite a word. No, that's not going to stop unwanted broadcasts. What if they're a strong broadcast? So it sounds like it would be programming the spam folder in effect. Navtex broadcasts are sent. So when are they sent? Is it immediately following traffic lists? That was early on. We saw that the coast stations may broadcast traffic lists to let you know whether you have any messages. Does that then do they automatically send their the maritime safety information? No. In B, in categories of messages indicated by a single letter or identifier. Well, that's close to what they're looking for. See if there's anything better. D, on request of maritime mobile stations. So they'll only broadcast it if they're requested to? No, this is an automated type service. They've got some for aviation also, which it would be nice if we had a section to study those. That's more the pilots. We'll study the NOTAMs and other notices that go out to aircraft in general. Which airports are closed down? Which ones are basically asked to divert around? What type of major navigation or weather type information is out there? Or D, regularly after the radio telephone silent periods. That would be kind of interesting. Silent period, and then they start off with the Navtex type broadcast. No, that's not what it is. It's going to be we do see that the messages are categorized by the single letter. I think it was A for navigation, E for weather. So B looks like the best answer there. Navtex is an international automated system for instantly distributing maritime safety information, MSI, which I show in the middle box here. And that includes navigational warnings, meteorological information, search and rescue alerts or notices, and similar information. So the shore organization has a number of these items. They bunch them all together as maritime safety information, and then they're broadcast. Apparently, in different regions, they broadcast them differently. So if you're region A or B, within a few hundred miles of shore, you will have the broadcast services are the local Navtex, and they do broadcasts on 518 kilohertz. And on your ship, you pick it up with a Navtex receiver. If you're further out in the areas that are not covered, or let's say you're more than 400 miles from a broadcast station, or even 300 or 200 during the day, you have a local CES. Both of those bounce it up to the satellite, the International Marine Satellite Network's coordination station. That then is broadcast on the Ocean Region Satellite, and the shipboard equipment to receive those type of transmissions are EGC Safety Net Receiving Facility. And I do explain that a little bit here. I might do it right now, as a matter of fact. Yes, the safety net system That is in effect the Navtex, but it comes off the satellites. And you can see in the bottom illustration, the ground station is bouncing it up to the satellite, and then your safety net receiver on board the ship picks up the signal. And we can see there's 4 satellites in orbit. They would be in geosynchronous orbit since they're positioned at one point over the Earth. You can see the blue satellite is above India, and the red satellite is above South America. And then there's 2 in between. All right, so if you are between 70 degrees north and 70 degrees south, outside the coverage of a Navtex station. All right. They do have one of the options as being NBDP, and if we haven't looked at it recently, I did notice it was there was a question on it in Key Topic 17, but just as a refresher, in simple terms, NBDP, narrowband direct printing, is a telex. It's a way to communicate with text rather than by voice, very similar to Navtex that we're talking about. It is said that NBDP was introduced in the GMDSS to help seafarers whose first language was not English. They did not have to speak to broadcast their distress message. Instead, they could type and send. NBDP can send and receive text messages with, to, and from a single station, or it can broadcast a message to all stations that have their receiver tuned to the frequency on which the message is transmitted. And you can see NBDP is required for GMDSS ships that operate in Sea Area 2 unless they have an additional Inmarsat receiver, which most of them do. So if you don't find one of these older pieces of equipment, which was earlier described as still required, but it's basically gathering dust in the corner, it's because they didn't even bother getting it because they have more than one satellite receiver. But as you can see, it still is a telex. It sends out text messages. It can give you some of this maritime safety information. All right, so the last question. Drum roll. MSI, maritime safety information, can be obtained by one or more of the following. Navtex, safety net, high frequency NBDP, or all the above. So where can you get that maritime safety information? Yes, you can get it from all the above. So you could get text messages directly from a ground station. You can get it basically from other ships or other units that have the direct printer, or the safety net, which indicates the satellites. So all the above, it is all the above. And basically you can receive meteorological as well as emergency messages all in a digital format that is non-voice. To learn more about MSI, visit the Coast Guard website. All right, at this point, I don't know if you want to learn much more about that. So I'm going to end the poll, share the results, stop sharing, and then I'm going to thank everyone for attending.